So before you and I discuss the specifics of squat technique, I just want to show you what my squat technique looks like on a general basis. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you 5 repetitions from the side view and 5 repetitions from the front view. And I want you to watch everything from my foot position to my knee position, my hip movement, my torso position, elbow position. Don't pay attention to the bar position yet. I'll discuss that at the end of the seminar. So again, just paying attention to the feet, knees, hips, torso, elbow. And what I'm going to start explaining is everything from the ground up. Okay, so first let's start with the feet and specifically talking about foot position. What you'll notice is my feet are right about shoulder width apart. My heels are pretty much directly in line with my shoulders, and my toes are slightly externally rotated. Okay, so from this position to about 2 to maybe 3 inches wider per foot tends to be where people are going to get the most bang for their buck. That's where you're going to find most people are going to feel the safest and strongest with their squat. There are outliers, obviously. Some people will do better with an even wider stance, and some people will do better with a narrower stance. But the vast majority of people will feel best and strongest and safest right around shoulder width apart to maybe 2 to 3 inches wider than shoulder width. Okay. Now, specifically in regard to the externally rotated toes, some people say that you should never squat with your toes externally rotated, but I honestly couldn't disagree more. Some people absolutely can squat with their toes straight forward, pointed straight ahead, but most people are not going to be able to do that safely or effectively. Most people will actually be able to squat heavier with less risk of hip pain with their toes slightly externally rotated. And essentially that's just because when you turn your toes out, you get more external rotation in the hips, which gives you more breathing room as you descend into the squat. So it's probably going to help you get deeper, and it's going to decrease your chance of any hip impingement on the way down. Okay? So don't worry about externally rotating your toes. It's totally fine. Now, I like this picture because we're going to talk about how you should center the weight on your feet, number 1, how you should balance, and 2, how you should be driving through the floor, where you should be driving from, which are really, it's a two-point discussion, but a lot of times people lump these topics together, which creates some confusion. So first and foremost, we're going to talk about the balance point. And we look at these 3 points on the foot, 1 under the knuckle of the big toe, 1 under the knuckle of the little toe, and 1 directly under the heel. And under these, in the middle of these 3 points, we have the midfoot, okay? And so what I want you to do is that's where I want you, right in here, is to center your weight on your feet, okay? I want you to find the midfoot, and that's where your balance point is going to be. When you can balance through the midfoot right in the center of these 3 points, that's where you're going to get the most surface area directly on the floor, and you're going to get the most feedback from the floor, and you're going to get the most stability. So the less likelihood that you're going to lose your balance or fall over or be moving a lot. You want to stay stable as possible to get the most efficient force transfer, okay? Now, when we're actually transferring force and driving into the floor, we want to be driving from the heel. And this is where a lot of confusion comes in because people hear drive to the heel, and a lot of times they think I should balance to the heel as well, and that's not the case. You want to be balancing through your midfoot, but driving through your heel, okay? If you drive through the midfoot, a lot of times your weight will roll forward, go more towards your toes, and that's when you get some more risk of knee injury, okay? So balance through the midfoot, really drive as much force as possible from the heel, and that's where you're going to get the most bang for your buck. Now, what I want you to look at now is we're going to look at knee position, okay? And I just want you to watch where my knees go in relation to my toes, and just watch my overall technique. All right, and as you saw, my knees did in fact cross my toes, which a lot of people in this industry would say is inherently dangerous and a really stupid idea. But what research is consistently showing us is that, number 1, if you have healthy knees, so you don't have pre-existing or current knee pain or injuries, and if you squat with good technique, mostly meaning that you have a posterior weight shift where your weight is more towards your heels and your heels stay flat on the floor, then allowing your knees to cross your toes is very, very safe. It's totally fine. Not only that, But what I'm finding is, and a lot of the best squatters in the world find, is that if you let your knees cross your toes, you obviously are going to use more quad, and essentially you're going to get more muscle recruitment and more power out of the whole, okay? The more quad you can use, the better. I challenge you to find a phenomenal squatter with tiny quads. It's not going to happen. All the best squatters in the world have massive quads, and the best squatters in the world also tend to use a knee dominant, very quad dominant squat, okay? So don't be afraid of letting your knees travel in front of your toes. What you find here in my squat is my knees tend to go about 1.5 to 2 inches in front of my toes, but please pay attention to this. My heels stay flat on the floor, okay? If your heels are coming off the floor, you're going to get more of an anterior weight shift, so the weight's coming more towards the front of your body, and that's where you get a huge risk of knee injury. As long as you have no knee pain and no knee injuries and your heels are flat on the floor, you should be totally fine with your knees going slightly in front of your toes. It's not a problem. Now, if you do get knee pain or if you do have a knee injury, use more of a hip dominant squat. That's totally fine. Use more of a box squat or take your stance out a little bit wider and use more of a hip dominant movement pattern. That's all totally fine. But if you don't have any knee pain or you don't have any knee injuries, letting your knees pass in front of your toes is probably going to be your best bet for a really strong squat. Now I want to look at hip position, okay, and hip movement as you descend into the hole. So watch this technique and just pay attention to everything happening. Okay, so what we see here is this area. Well, let me actually get the laser pointer. Okay, so we have this arrow pointing straight back to the wall behind me, okay? And that arrow is depicting what a lot of people say as hips back, get your hips back, because that's the cue we so often hear is hips back, 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 especially in the powerlifting world. Then we have this other arrow going straight down. And some people say, well, you just want to sit straight down in the squat. You know, only think about sitting straight down right to the floor. And these two arrows depict the two extremes. What I've found is somewhere in the middle, surprise, surprise, if you know my work, I'm more of a middle ground type of guy. Somewhere in the middle tends to be the best. So not necessarily sitting straight back, trying to touch the wall behind me with my butt, and not necessarily sitting straight down, but rather more sitting a little bit more towards the middle. And I will say, I do tend to promote a little bit more of a straight down approach. So not necessarily going straight down, but you see how this arrow is more towards the straight down approach as opposed to the sit back approach. That's because I found sitting slightly more straight down than as far back still gets a lot more quad involvement, and it helps my torso stay upright better and leads to a more efficient force transfer and better overall position throughout the squat. So a combination of sitting back and sitting straight down, also with a slight emphasis on sitting straight down, is going to be your best bet. Okay, so now we can talk about bar position, okay? And what you're going to see is that the bar right here, it's not really, really high, okay? It's not like right on my upper traps or on the C-spine, but it's also not ultra low down here like a lot of low bar powerlifters take it. It's more towards the moderate middle approach, okay? And this is where I find personally I get the best results. A lot of my lifters and my athletes get the best results here. Keep in mind, some people, if they can handle it, they can go much higher, and that's totally fine. Other people will go lower, and that's totally fine as well. This is one of the areas of the squat that is totally up to personal preference, okay? There's no right or wrong here. If you like high bar better, go high bar. If you like low bar better, go low bar. The only way you're going to find out is if you give them both a shot, a fair chance for a significant amount of time, okay? So try high bar for 8 weeks, then try low bar for 8 weeks, and then make a decision. And keep in mind, as you progress in your training career, you might find that your preferences will change over time. And that's totally fine. Just don't get dogmatic in your ways and don't think that one is inherently better than the other. Everything is going to work differently for different people, and keep that in mind. And that's going to make you a better squatter and a better coach in the long run.
And that wraps today's video up. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to follow my YouTube channel, you can click right here and be taken to my entire list of YouTube videos with lots of tutorials on both training and nutrition. And if you want to talk about online coaching with me, you can click right here and I'll get you set up with that as well. Have a good day.